So we have the dream that you're talking about and the higher planes. And then you were also talking about the earth, which is the enslavement, colonial. What was going on in your time that you wanted to create this character, Caliban? What is it? What is this the real place? You talked about Tempest and the nature that will take over us and all of that. But in the character of Caliban and this story of slavery, whether it's the aerial slave or tell us about Caliban. And I want to know what you felt about these guys, Jaimin Hansu, Helen Mirren, and what about?
They were wonderful players. I lived at a time where the greatest nations on the earth were carving up the globe for their convenience, stealing resources, enslaving people. The Spanish, the English, the Portuguese, the Italians had a go, but they're never going to achieve much. Poor sods can't make their minds up. Were sailing the seven seas, discovering wonderful indigenous people with new cultures, new colours, new songs and tales to tell, and immediately adjudging them goons, buffoons and idiots. Look you at this ridiculous character. Laugh at the Indian, they'd say. Laugh at the savage. But these people had their own stories, their own songs, these wonderful people. You'd see paraded through the streets of London on any given day, peoples of different hues, pigments, glorious rainbows of flesh in chains. This was fascinating to me because often technology somehow has usurped the idea of sophistication. Because there are galleons now and cannonballs now, this has given credibility over ancient folklores and indigenous wonders. This was fascinating for me to see people the world over enslaved, inhibited, enchained, their cultures ground into powder and blown into the faces of people for entertainment. Caliban is a representative of this idea, the idea of colonialism. This man, daughter of son of a sorceress, suddenly, for the purposes of Prospera, enslaved, enchained. This representation, he is the voice of the island. That's why he knows where the pig nuts are. That's why he knows where the secrets are. People, I think, are rather patronising about rural and pastoral folk, those people that seem to be the living embodiment of the land. But we need those people just as surely as we need Ariel, we need Caliban, because we exist between the two. We are the fusion of the earth and the air, with a little bit of divine fire tearing through all of our hearts.
Tell me about why you think, if you think it's an okay idea that the Prospero was made into Prospera at this time.
I think it was a wonderful idea, firstly because uniquely you had a fantastic female player to embody the role. Now, for me, sorcery and science, this apex which I earlier mentioned, is important because someone told me a dog will recognise its master whatever his master is wearing, whether he's in his dressing gown or in a top hat or in the nude. We will see God in all things. So regardless of the creed or the culture through which you receive the message, the God remains the same. Now, it's impossible, I think, to ignore the essential femininity of the earth. The earth is Mother Earth, not Father Earth. The seas, the soil, the air, the creatures, they all suggest femininity through creation as unignorably as we all ooze from a uterus. That's an unignorable, inexorable fact. Indefatigably so, we emerge from cunts. That can't be denied or ignored. Show me the man that emerged from a cock, and I'll show you a peculiar freak. So nature is inherently female. So in this transition between male and female is interesting. I think it works wonderfully well for the piece. All you've done really is changed a single syllable, but you've also made the story of the play, the protagonist's journey, Prospera instead of Prospero, for me, infinitely more interesting. And as countless people have said, talent borrows, genius steals. And there were certain passages and words within the text of The Tempest that may have appeared elsewhere in classical literature, reappropriated by me, and some of them were from female characters. Prospera is, for me, a fascinating transition, and so I think it helps the story, particularly in its contemporary form, particularly when you're living at a time where patriarchy is bludgeoning the earth into ecological disaster, when the seas turn black black and the skies turn grey, perhaps it's good to be reminded of the potency of femininity.
So the mother-daughter thing, is that the same as the father-daughter? Do you feel like it's changed, or does it take on something new? What's your...
It's distinct because, of course, Prospera has the reminiscences and the memories of her own early womanhood. There is not the opposition or the genital compatibility that one finds in father-daughter relationships, and that is significant. But for me, in this instance, it enhances the story. And for me, there are 1,000 ways to tell the same tale, and it's an interesting interpretation, and I would never be so arrogant as to inhibit the profligacy and the evolution of this story. Whatever makes it relevant, whatever makes it resonate, for me, that's a good thing.
So is there anything that you feel in this particular version of this film version of The Tempest that surprised you, as wouldn't be, you know, in a way that you just didn't think it could possibly be interpreted that way?
I think there is incredible latitude for interpretation with the literal translation and description of some of the individual pieces of language. But for me, I like the velocity of film. I like that you can move between scenes effortlessly without the introduction of clowns to aid the reset, so the function of the comedy becomes purer. I enjoy the nod to previous romantic trysts evident. I enjoy enormously the scope allowed by the landscape of the location, that suddenly you can see barren wastelands and tangled brambles and the forests of the mind, and themes that occur in psychiatry, psychology and myth suddenly visual, not just suggested through language, but there. You can see that this is a barren landscape. You can see that the character is exposed. You can see that Caliban is ensconced in rock, both his own skin and his dwelling. For me, this interpretation affords a lot more colour and texture than you will ever get through syllables and vibrations alone.
What else would you like to tell us about our time, Shakespeare, right now?
I can tell you, for me, it's, as I said, what prevails in, may I be so bold, any great work is that there are themes uninhibited by time. There will always be politicians and leaders that lie. Entertainment will always be used to spellbind the masses. People will always try to distract us from our higher nature. So if you want to give access to people to the higher things, the finer things, the things that are within us all that are not exclusive for their finery, then you have to deliver almost a suppository. You have to lift momentarily the veil. These things continue. There's still the illusion of choice between Democrat or Republican or Catholic and Protestant, but it all, what is it? In the end, what remains? The thing that is perpetual for me, the theme that will continually exist, is love. This is the only thing that is relevant, because all else can be filtered and rendered and reissued, repackaged 1,000 ways for the purposes. The devil can cite scripture for any reason. So for me, the thing that is perpetual is love. That people will always love one another. There will always be external forces asking us to deny our essential love. People will always want to inhibit the nature of man. Someone will always be trying to chain Ariel and oppress Caliban, but somewhere within us, love will conquer all.
So you aren't just a cynic. I mean, because you're very cynical and dark in how you show people's dark and rough sides. You don't make things so simplistic.
Because things are not simplistic, and cynicism is necessary both for comedy and tragedy, but that doesn't devalue optimism. In fact, that merely is a conduit through which optimism can be delivered.
That's beautiful. And the other thing that I think when I watch this play and its musicality, and actually talk to me about the music of the movie, but one of the themes that is very much a part of it is the freedom. Talk about your concept of freedom from your day right up to today. What is that word?
Freedom is elemental to man, is to us what water is to a fish, and yet we're denied it at every turn. That people try to reappropriate us, that people create psychological mazes for us to exist within. Freedom will, like love, because perhaps it's synonymous with love, it will be a continual theme. Caliban is denied freedom, Ariel is denied freedom, Prospero at the beginning of the film denied freedom, Ferdinand and Miranda denied freedom at different times. People strive for freedom, and currently on the freest nation on the earth there is, it seems to me, less freedom than in any time of history. A prescriptive freedom, the absolute manufacture of consent, freedom to do as we tell you, freedom to turn on your television set, freedom to consume this product, freedom to sit down and shut up. That seems to be the freedom that we have access to today. But within us all, this is the divine spark and the constant possibility of change. That's why the forces that oppress us are so militant and powerful and loud and constantly marshalling us, because the possibility for change constantly exists. It never ends. That's why there are police in the streets and soldiers in their barracks, because it's just a decision, just a moment, and it lives within us all, the possibility for freedom. The freedom achieved by Ariel but denied Caliban exists within us all constantly, perhaps through our divine nature, if not through our earthly shackles.
And mortality then. She says, I will return to Milan where every third thought shall be my grave. What is, you are immortal? Are you immortal? Are you here in the flesh? And what is it with the zippers?
Well, these are very nice. This is merely furniture of the arms. This is a wonderful bodice that you have furnished me with. I'm enjoying it enormously. I wish we'd had them in my day. There's a sadomasochistic undertone that I find thrilling to the flesh. Mortality is inevitable. Someone, a sage, once said to me that all forms of desire are the desire to be at one with God in inappropriate substitute form. Whether you crave a new car, fellatio, or a wonderful pair of shoes, ultimately what you want is to be unified with God. The best part of us never dies. The best part of us is immortal and constant, and whether it's through legacy or through love, the grander aspects of our nature continue infinitely as the heavens themselves, as infinitely as each rotating sphere or tiny rotating electron. In infinite space, the circle, the ballet continues. All that ends is material and was dust and came from dust and returns to dust and was ever nothing, and it was only our belief in it being something that made it so. So all that is beautiful is continual, so there is nothing to be afraid of.
What are your hopes for this new version of one of your plays? What do you hope with this American and audience in the world? What do you think? What do you
I
think?
hope for you and for your version of the Tempest, that you don't end up preaching to the converted, that you don't end up being applauded by the chattering classes. I would hope that once again the monkeys that graze may turn from picking fleas and for a moment remember that we're all divine. For 1 second, turn off your TV set and do something less boring instead. That for a moment, people are enlightened and enchanted by the things that are eternal. That the prescriptive nature of culture doesn't prohibit people from witnessing true beauty. That's what I would hope for, that enough people see it, that new people see it. That not just people who watch The Tempest, but people who previously never even heard of The Tempest watch The Tempest. That would be my hope for you.
And you?
Why not? I'm everywhere.